Welcome everybody from wherever you are in the world today. This webinar's title is Has Agile Helped or Hurt Testing? So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jeff Payne. I'm the CEO of Coveros. I've been building and testing software now for over 30 years. I've run a couple of software consulting companies, including Coveros, which focuses on helping people accelerate their delivery of software using Agile and DevOps methods. A little bit of backdrop about this webinar. So it's hard to believe that Agile is 20 years old, right? At least hard for me to believe that. It seems like it was just yesterday. But earlier this spring, of course, Agile celebrated its 20th anniversary. And I thought it would be interesting to talk about how testing has changed in that period of time and whether Agile has helped or hurt testing, or whether Agile hurt testing. And I figured the best way to do that was get a couple of other people like me who remember what the world was like before Agile. And we can talk a little bit about what's changed and is this good? Is this bad? And what everybody thinks about the world today and how testing has changed. So let me go ahead and let them introduce themselves and then we'll get started. Johanna, you want to go first?
Sure. So you can read all that stuff on the slide. Let me just say, I started as a software developer in 1977. That was my first professional work experience. And then as I started to manage projects and become a tester and lead testing and lead organizations, I learned how to do things in ways that worked. And very rarely was waterfall the answer. So I'm more focusing on management these days because those are the books I most recently published. Because you know me, I write a book and then I talk about it some more and I run workshops and then I do something else. So I am really looking forward to contrasting where we were in the 90s and the O's with where we are now. I think we can have a really great conversation about all of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Johanna. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Let me turn it over to Rob to introduce himself. Go ahead, Rob.
Hi. Well, thanks for having me. And it's good to be here. You can read all the stuff there. I've been involved in software engineering as part of product development since, I like to say, the dawn of time, but it's not quite the dawn of time. I wrote my first code 5 years before Johanna started working there, 1972. And that was, of course, in high school as part of a computer club. And I tell you the truth, I had a great time doing that. And we spent so much effort testing and doing stuff that like static analysis and all sorts of crazy things back then. Frankly, because computers were very hard to get at and it had to work really well because runtime was expensive. I did my first commercial release of software June the 4th, 1982. It was a graphics system that actually had windowing on bus-mounted cards on computers that you probably wouldn't recognize, called PDP-11s back then. I worked on Unix code bases at university. I had actually experience with kernel coding in Unix, and I was really inspired by the way they developed software at AT&T. That when they built Unix, it was all done with iterative incremental approaches. And that's how I learned software development, iterative incremental approaches following the Unix model from AT&T. I worked in many domains, many disciplines, multilingual computing, CAD, CAM, medical software, and internationalization. And then I sort of started to be an independent consultant, helping people all over the world basically get things done in software engineering, the entire life cycle from an idea all the way to decommissioning and everything in between. But I've had a passion for testing as part of software development. And I've written and published a lot on that subject, and I teach and train and consult in that area right now. And that's where I've had great opportunities to collaborate with people like Jeff and Johanna over the years. And I look forward to this chat.
Very cool. We're going to turn off screen share right now because we're going to talk just as a group for the rest of this webinar. Thank you very much. Welcome, Rob, as well. Looking forward to your comments. Let's kick things off by making sure we've got our definitions straight. Johanna, how do you define agility? What does agility mean to you?
So that's where, especially in for technical people. They work as a collaborative team, iterating over feature sets, delivering frequently. And there are several parts. Well, they deliver frequently to get feedback, not just to deliver, but to understand what can we learn from our delivery. Do we learn about the process? Do we learn about the product? Do we learn about the teamwork? All of that stuff. So when I think about agility, it's not the dev team and the test team, right? Where the dev team delivers stuff and the test team tries to catch it and then test it. No, this is a cross-functional collaborative team that works together and frequently delivers something to learn from it.
What do you think of that, Rob? What do you think about that definition? You go with that?
Well, I could dance with that one. You know, I've seen a lot of people vary a little bit here, but I love the feedback. That's what I draw to your attention. The feedback part, that's key, and also the adapting, the learning, and the collaboration. Absolutely love it, and that's how I see it. If you want to get into semantics, I wish everybody saw it that way.
Yeah, let's not cover that now. But yeah, I totally agree with where you're going. That might be a next webinar, Rob.
Okay.
Because I totally agree with you on that. So for you, Rob, how would you define testing? Right?
Testing.
We're here to talk about agile testing. Now we talked about agility. What's testing mean to you?
So there's I guess three elements to it. But testing is first and foremost for me learning about things that relate to risk, and taking that learning and feeding it back to the team, and hopefully enabling people to act on it and do something meaningful with it. There's three sort of elements of these type of activities, three sort of ways to learn, or three sort of types of work people do to learn, which would include, I guess, your sort of validation type of stuff, which is make sure that things are doing what the customer really needs done from a domain or subject matter perspective. Then there's a verification, which is just a massive amount of stuff. And I think there's been huge evolution on that since the dawn of the Agile era. A lot of the continuous integration technologies, techniques, and methodologies have sort of kicked in. That's a lot of verification stuff. And then for me, the passion, of course, is to learn and adaptively learn and explore. So there's validation, verification, exploration types of activities that fall under what I see testing as. And again, there's a lot of different people that have very formal definitions, but I like the sort of validation, verification, exploration, learning.
What do you think about that, Johanna? How do you see testing, and how does that align with your thinking?
So I really like what Rob said, where he talked about all the pieces. And for me, I really think about testing as offering information about the product under test. Right? We might have to offer various kinds of information, but the whole point of testing is so that we actually understand what we are doing, right? What have we delivered so far? What are we doing now? What kind of information do we need about the product? And certainly that will illuminate stuff about the process. Great.
Thanks, Johanna. So we're going to cover agile testing and whether it helped or hurt testing. We're going to look at it from three different angles. We're going to look at it from as an individual contributor. Has it helped or hurt? We're going to look at it from a team perspective. Has it helped or hurt? And we're going to look at it from an enterprise perspective. Has it helped or hurt? And then we're going to end with some thoughts and ideas for you all on how you can go improve your agile testing. So let's jump into that. Johanna, you're up first. Let's talk about from an individual contributor perspective. Why don't you kick it off, and then we'll just have a discussion about, for the individual, is Agile good or bad for testers? What do you think? Or for testing, whoever those people are, right? Devs, tests, whatever. What do you think?
So this has really changed over the past 20 years. So I don't know if you remember back in the 80s and, well, first of all, in the 70s, when I started off as a developer, there was no such a thing as a tester. We tested each other's code as developers. And in the 80s, about when the price of computers came down, when we started to make applications and products on personal computers, so everybody could have their own computer, that's really when the profession of testing was born. there was a lot of stuff written about testing before, but it was mostly written, in my experience, for people who are also programmers, right? Not just testers. And I don't mean just testers, but that the focus of their work was testing, not product development on the main product. So in the 80s, we had much less expensive computers. Now in the 90s, with all the various maturity models, we started, and that's when people started to separate the developers from the testers. So now we have the Agile Manifesto for software development, and they start talking about a cross-functional team. And Scrum comes out and says, everybody is a developer, as in a product developer. Well, some of us have been saying that for many, many years in advance. And for those of us who used Agile approaches, well, what we would recognize as Agile approaches now, back in the 80s and the 90s, it never occurred to me to have testers as a separate team, and they did separate things, right? So Agile has really helped testing because it brought back the integration of testers onto the team. That it was one team where everybody had one goal to get a successful product out the door to customers for feedback, whatever it was. So I think in that sense, Agile really helped testing. And then I think all of us have seen organizations who said, well, developers can test. We want T-shaped people or I-shaped people or combs or brushes or all that stuff, right? We had many metaphors. We can just get rid of all the testing.
I think as an individual contributor, if you just look at what we're diving into at the beginning, right? The individual perspective.
Yeah.
What's really amazing is and you're following your evolution model there. The tester today, or since I guess the indoctrination into Agile, can actually have more direct input into the actual technical work being done. And I just, for me, I think that's really enabling. So I think what's amazing for individual contributors as a tester is they're able to dive in and really work with people making technical decisions, business decisions, all sorts of things, and not have to wait for other departments or phases or people or groups to do it. Even just the notion of going from like product management, which was sort of pre-agile modeling for product development, to today product ownership models for that. And it's a big different world because now the product management is sort of like a marketing role. Product ownership is a business role. And it's fascinating to have people who are testers working in Agile teams that can work with those business stakeholders in the same day that they're technically figuring out a complex test solution to a problem and looking at non-functional, functional, all this stuff at the same time. I think it's just fantastic that testers today are in Agile are able to do that. They're enabled, they're empowered. I think that's just an incredible thing. If you look at something that's happened, Agile has helped that happen. Whether everyone takes advantage of it,
different story, right?
Yeah, really. I think we have work to do still.
I think your point on there, Rob, and you said it too, Johanna, is, many of us from when we started, it was a collaborative type of environment before the 80s, and kind of process and waterfall really took hold. And we used to, and I know you all did too, I did as well, I always used to push the testers needed to be involved from the very first day of the project, because we needed to validate and verify everything and influence the requirements and the design and those things. And I agree that Agile has kind of brought that philosophy back and then has enabled it if you follow the Agile manifesto, right? Which I'm sure some in the audience are saying, yeah, that's all great, but we're not doing that right now. So are there ways that maybe, that from the individual perspective, Agile has hurt? Can you think of anything, or do you think it's all positive for the individual?
I can dive in with some case studies. I've seen some terrible, terrible situations where Agile transitions have led to people have been, I guess, getting orphaned from their family. And this is not something that's directly caused by the principles and methods of Agile. It's the organizational transformations that, unfortunately, I've seen people with testing skills victimized by that, including recently. This is not just 20 years ago. This is something that's still happening today, and thanks to I guess the work of people like you, Jeff, with all the different organizational transformation tools and resources you can help people avoid these problems. But I've certainly seen testers fall sort of into this sort of situation where they used to be working in a team with people, and now they're alone on a team, and they don't really have anyone to work with who understands risks and prioritization and focusing and stuff like that. And talking to programmers, it's sometimes a pain in the butt when they're in that sort of situation. I've also seen great testers getting fired, laid off, lose their jobs and stuff like this. These are terrible stories. So I don't want to generalize that. I don't want to say that that's always there, but that can happen, and it's risky. I don't know if Johanna wants to compliment that, but
yeah, I do, because I think that a lot of us are accustomed to thinking of testers as part of a test team.
Yeah, or organization.
I would call that a work group, and
okay.
They were then assigned to product development teams. So they had kind of two teams, right? The people that they could talk about testing with, mm-hmm. and the people that they worked on the product with. And if you don't keep a community of practice for the testers, you miss out on all kinds of organizational learning. So we might get into, this might be part of the team, so you guys can tell me to shut up. But if we have a manager or a facilitator who is supposed to enable the team, facilitate the team, and that facilitator does not understand anything about testing, which I have seen way too often, then the testers have the worst of all possible worlds. They don't have a community of practice. They're the one lonely tester on the team. They have nobody to talk to bounce ideas off of, and the facilitator does not understand how testing offers value and does not understand how to support that person on the team. So there's, I think that there are a lot of potential risks when you move to product development teams, feature teams, whatever you want to call them. If you only have cross-functional teams, how do people learn from what's going on around the organization?
I think that's the very good point. The community of practice model helps the individual, so that fits in both the team and the individual. And so it's a nice segue, and I love that being thrown a segue here.
Yeah. So speaking of segues, Rob, can you jump on that? Right? I mean,
how about that?
The next question is from a team perspective. Has Agile helped or hurt testing? What do you think?
Let's work with that. I think, first of all, there's opportunities for us to do things like the community of practice, as opposed to the old school view of it, which was the center of excellence that said, you must do it this way, you must do it that way. That's not the same as a community of practice. It's a much, much more fluid thing. I think that what we see in teams that makes testing better is that people can actually collaborate. And I'm not talking about just kumbaya sort of stuff. I'm talking about real deep, solid technical work. Not just, I get criticized for this all the time, but I say it's not just the soft skills, it's the hard skills. I don't want to say there's anything right or wrong about both. You need them all. But darn it, it's wonderful to see people who are testers working in a team actually testing, debugging, troubleshooting, and getting things working, and then helping make the trade-offs. All of that as a team of people working together. It's just great to see the technical collaboration. I just first of all, I love it to pieces. And when I see it, well, I try to point it out to people how beautiful it is, what they're doing. And when I see things not working out, well, then it's an opportunity to really teach and improve. And the retrospectives help people do that quite a bit. I think that in the teams, we also have sort of the collaboration, but there's also the fact that in Agile, it so encourages retrospectives and feedback on that. And of course, I know Johanna's a guru in this space of retrospectives, and I learned so much from her over the years. But what I love about today, Agile retrospective stuff, and this is real exciting for me, is you can do and change things soon after the observation. I did retrospectives on projects and I thought it was tight 3 months after we did it, and always we ran into the thing, hey, we got to do better unit testing. Yeah, what's the point? And then the team changes. Now it's the same team. It gets to self-organize, adapt, read back, and then the retrospective sort of forces you to reflect and adapt based on what's recently happened. And I just think that's a fantastic dynamic. So I think, yes, this is a very positive view of the team dynamic with testing.
And let me add one thing to that, because I'm going to talk a little bit about Kaizens and retros a little bit in a second. When was the last time on an Agile team did you have to have a bug triage meeting? I have not seen.
Last week.
Oh, God. Okay, fine. So
no, there's a third party. There's all sorts of different bugs. There's not all bugs. There's things that are caused by the team, and there's sometimes decisions you have to make about deploying third party software. So I have seen it.
Yes,
but it's not a part of the culture of development anymore. It's something that you do when you have to do it. You have to make tough decisions sometimes, but it should be rare, and it is rare. But I still see it.
Okay, back in the 90s and in the early O's, when I was doing all these assessments on product development process, I worked with way too many organizations that had weekly bug triage meetings. That's how many bugs they had.
Yep.
That's how many.
That's huge.
And I don't see that. I still see, as you say, some bug triage meetings, and yes, it totally depends. However, one of the things that's really helped the team is to say, we have a policy, we have a team agreement that we are not going to let known bugs slip through to the next whatever iteration or the next item, if we're working in flow. So that has to be a team agreement. Now, I have certainly seen managers who don't really want an Agile approach. They want mini waterfalls, which means the testers get everything at the end, and that just means you have 2-week waterfalls, which is horrible. That's a death march for everybody.
Absolutely.
But the lack of regular bug triage meetings every single week, I think that's a really, really big thing.
Well, there's something else, though, that gets kicked in that we see in Agile that is not, I'm not replacing the notion of triage, but the actual deliberate decision of what we're going to be doing in planning, and looking deeply in two things. One is what is the requirement level stuff and grooming and that type preparation activities, and then the actual team planning and what is the actual work we're going to do in the next sprint or to fulfill this requirement or the story or whatever we're working on, the object of our work. That session that's a team collaboration activity where we can ask the questions, what is the scope and depth of risk that we're going to explore based on the requirements, based on the environment, and based on the real technical work that's going to be done. And this is something that we never really saw in old school style waterfall structured methodologies that we see as being possible, not universal, by the way, by far, as you were saying. There's your mileage varies, right? There's a lot of different stuff going on, but I really love it. And I want to just make one little metaphor here because this fits in so well. It's important, it's critical to enable this, that people who have testing skills and experience actively participate in these planning and grooming sessions. And if you don't actively participate on it, you're basically going to lose the opportunity to be one of the most influential people on the team.
So this is why I really like the Three Amigos way of writing requirements, right? I might write them as user stories. I might write them as FDD stories, feature-driven development, however we write them. As long as we are writing them together as a team, I really like, and the Three Amigos is really a great way to do it. We might write totally as a team, where we mob on the stories as a team. We might write in pairs. We have many, many ways to do this. But the more the team works together on preparing the work, on shaping the work, on delivering the work, on experimenting as we deliver the work, and then delivering it and showing it to the people who are interested and the people who need to be interested. Yeah. The more we demo together, the better off we are as a team. So I find that Agile has really helped teams collaborate a whole lot better. I was going to say more better, but
more better.
Yeah, more
and
better.
I think you're hitting on a key thing here that is really important for the audience to understand, because we see this problem you mentioned early on, Johanna, like, a little mini waterfalls right inside of sprints. That doesn't work. But people are always like, well, what do we do differently? How do we work differently? I think you just hit on them, right? It's all these types of collaborative activities that you should be doing. You should be using the 3 Amigo model to get, the business development and test all in sync and on the same page about what's being done. You should be pairing constantly, right? You should be doing retros together. Obviously, you should be mobbing. You should be working. I always say it's not every sprint. It's not every day. It's every hour and every minute that you have to be working together, at least in small pieces of the team. And if you're not doing that, it will not work. And to me, this is the fundamental challenge that I think organizations still have. They haven't internalized that. Last final thoughts before we move on to the next subject. What else do we want to talk team-wise?
Well, you want to talk about the dark side?
Yeah, dark side, baby.
So the dark side is as I think it came up already, but it's siloing. This is something that I can't I don't really understand why it's there, but it is there, and it shows up over and over again. And even you see a mature team. It even shows up in mature teams because people sort of get into this rut of doing this is their job, and that's Joe's job, and that's Phil's job, and you got all of a sudden silos come where there weren't necessarily silos at the beginning. So it's not just blame waterfall. It's like it's a little bit of human nature. I think that it's important that teams shake things up a bit, and I've seen excellence in that by teams basically forcing in the retro innovations. I mean, let's go and use the Hawthorne effect or something like that. Let's make a little innovation every time, do something different, keep things rolling. Don't get lethargic. Don't start, falling into these paths that lead to silos. And that's just one of the dark side sort of risks.
So Rob, that's actually called resource efficiency thinking, where we reinforce the expertise of every single individual person on the team. And that's part of the reward system that needs to change. And teams can overcome this if they do frequent enough Kaizens and retros. But if the reward system continues to reinforce individual expertise, the team will always have silos.
Just sounds like a segue to organizational discussions.
I was thinking the same thing, Robin. I noticed a question came in about, this is great and helpful. How does it apply to multiple teams? And that obviously segues into, from an organizational perspective, has Agile helped or hurt testing? You want to kick things off, Johanna?
Okay. I'm going to just talk about the scaling frameworks right now. I'm not going to name any of them. They are all broken. You might take a model of scaling from them. However, scaling themselves, when you take what one team does and say, all the teams have to do this, all the teams have to use iterations, we will always collaborate and we will always be done in the same 2-week lockstep thing. That does not work. You can say, well, on a cadence of 2 weeks, we want to see what you have demoed, right? What you can demo. And we want you to use continuous integration and continuous delivery inside the organization. But if you are not starting from a place of continuous integration, continuous delivery, and how every single team can deliver their stuff on time, then scaling anything is broken. You will get plenty of process, you will get plenty of bloat, and God forbid, you will get plenty of management. And it's all interference. So how does that go with Agile testing? Well, you know who they're going to blame. All those people are going to blame the testers for not being fast enough. This makes me crazy, as you can tell. So
You can tell.
So we have several problems in the organization, which as an industry, as a community, we have not yet solved. The reward system rewards expertise, individual expertise, not team collaboration or team support. The prevalence of the scaling frameworks means people are not thinking about their complexity of their situation, which is why I wrote the Agile and Lean program management book about this. And if we don't have teams as collaborative teams, right, the thing I first said, if we still have a testing team or the reliability team or the performance team, and we try and bring them together in an Agile program, nothing works. So it's not that Agile has hurt testing from the organizational perspective, except in how organizations appear mostly to try their Agile transformation or to try their scaling.
There's been a lot of initiatives over the years, if I can jump in on that point, to sort of address testing as part of an organizational framework. And the most famous ones that I know of were models that were espoused by companies like Xerox following the TQM movement. There was that's a total quality movement. There's an era in product development history, not just software, but it was very influential, led to all sorts of crazy things happening, some good, some bad. But there was an organizational effort. There was an organizational notion that was saying, hey, your VP of quality has to exist and you have to have this independence and all that. There was a whole notion like that. And when we look at what Agile brought to testing organizational perspective, I think it just ignored the issue. I think that the manifesto talked about self-organized teams doing great work and beautiful things to fulfill the customer's need, but it never went and said, hey, where's the manifesto entries about the organization? Where's the manifesto entries? Where's the principles about that? And that doesn't mean people of goodwill don't do things bad or maliciously. It's just that it's not part of the framework of Agile. So a lot of people took it in different directions. And offline, we could list all these methodologies that have not worked very consistently. But I really want to start with buzzword-driven software engineering organizational change. And I call this being driven to confusion. And I can name a whole bunch of driven, especially the shift left movement pushing test-driven on organizations and imposing it on every single team, every single programmer, every single group. And I was like, what is this? That's not going to be a very effective organizational transformation. And it's sort of blamed on Agile. I think that one of the weaknesses we have in Agile is we don't have anything to stick to organizationally. And that's one of the strengths of it too, because it gives you flexibility. But I do think that is a weakness. And I just wanted to compliment the comments.
Yeah.
Well, and
regarding that, PMOs.
Oh, well, let me just say one thing. Yeah, I will get to PMOs. God.
We only have a few minutes, so get there.
Okay. But remember, it's the Agile Manifesto for software development, not for organizational transformation. So I wrote the project portfolio book in 2009, right? That's when it came out. I specifically did not talk about PMOs there because I have not had very much luck with PMOs. I have had great luck with middle managers getting together as a cohort, right? Senior leadership says, this is a strategy. And the team say, tell us what to do. And the middle managers get together and say, for the next couple months, maybe 3 months, how do we implement the strategy? That's the job of what a PMO should do. And then they might also have a consulting arm of the PMO, but not a mandating arm. The mandating arm that says everybody will do the same Agile approach. That's just craziness, right? All of you know teams who can absolutely use Scrum, and all of you know teams who could never use Scrum because they have totally unpredictable work. If you have a security team in your organization, they are seeking out threats. They are responding to threats. They cannot possibly predict their work, well, for much more than a day or two. There's no way they should use Scrum, but they need a way to actively respond to what's going on and to assess what's going on. So I think it's really important to say, if you want a PMO, what does that PMO do for you? What value does it offer the organization? I could be totally wrong. Go ahead.
Rob, anything you want to add?
Well, I don't know. It's I just love listening to Johanna talk about PMOs. It's so fun. I just, you got, that's a loose cannon in some organizations, and people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on software engineering, and they want what they call governance. And the PMOs have that sort of role in some places. Like it or not, it impacts business. And yeah, maybe the place that has that structure shouldn't be using Scrum and trying to do things that way. Maybe they should be doing something else. Some of the most successful projects I've ever worked on in my life followed models that were not Agile by the book Agile models, but they were really, really good. The AVT 710 product on the market for 10 and a half years, 15,000 units, 0 field reported defects in the whole life of the product. Don't tell me it can't be done. But we weren't following manifesto entries or something. We're just doing good, high value team, collaborative work, and we were in sync. We were in sync with the stakeholders. We were in sync with the teams. We shared values, value sync. That's what can get it. And that's the thing you should be working on, not governance and PMOs. Now, that I'm not going to say if you need governance, if you do have.
Well, yeah, but there's different kinds of governance, and cost accounting governance, where we look for the variance in schedule, that's not useful at all.
No, but the governance that I had to muck with in the medical business, that was useful. You don't want to kill someone with your software. You have to, and it's not just document the testing, it's prove the evidence matches the reality. That governance is good.
Yeah, so time is flying along here. We got to keep rolling. You all are doing awesome. I'll leave with one thought that I often ask a PMO that shows up and says, we've been asked to help standardize the Agile process. And I'll say, have you read the manifesto? And they'll say, oh, of course we have. And I'll say, doesn't it say that every team does a retro and tunes and adjusts its process to be successful? How are you going to govern across the organization process when Agile says every team adjusts and tunes its process? Ask them that question and you'll just watch them usually find another job, right? Because they don't fit together in that mold, right?
Jeff, are you familiar with Gilbert and Sullivan, the Mikado?
Sure.
You gotta let the punishment fit the crime.
All right, so let's keep rolling here. We're doing great. Thanks for everybody for hanging with us. We're going to end with one last question that I'm very curious to see what your answers are. And Joe and Rob's going to start with this one. What's the takeaway for the audience about how they can leave this web seminar and improve themselves, improve their teams, improve their org? What's like one or two takeaways that you think are the key things they ought to focus on going forward to make this work, make Agile testing work?
Can I get excited?
Get excited.
Be not afraid. Actively participate. Don't boss people around. Engage, learn, teach. Don't just complain, hey, they're not listening to me. They need to learn what you do. Actively participate, engage, advocate, work with the stakeholders, become a trusted advisor to the team, guide, and then adapt and learn. I think that's where I want to go.
Cool.
Be there.
Johanna, your thoughts?
So if I think about it from strictly a testing perspective, I think about a couple things. One is, how can we collaborate at the team level? How can we, as people on a team, how can we collaborate with our stakeholders as a team with, God forbid, the business, right? But the people who will either sell or use or somehow make our product more available to people outside the company? And how do we collaborate around the organization so that we start to measure stuff that makes sense, like cycle time? Like, how long does it take us to actually release something? All four measures and accelerate, those are the ones. And how long does it take us to make decisions? Right. So cycle time for how fast do we deliver stuff that works? It's all about stuff that works. Okay, I will stop now.
Well, I just wanted to throw into that collaboration stories is something that I've been collecting. I do task analysis interviews and collect and document stories on collaboration. I think teaching that is a very hard thing, and I think I want to challenge us. I think we have to learn more about how to teach that level of collaboration. I think it's important, it's critical, it's a success factor, and it's the way to go. But we have a lot of learning to do in how to teach that type of collaboration.
Yeah.
Awesome, great stuff. We are going to take questions in a bit, but before we do that, we want to do a couple of things. One, we have an audience poll that we're going to send out to everybody that we want you to really quickly just give us your opinion. Your opinion, has Agile helped or hurt testing, in your opinion? And it'll range from, not at all to yes, a lot. The second is has Agile helped your career? Do you think it has made a difference? While we're doing that, a couple of things that jumped into my mind that I think are helpful that we didn't discuss. I do think that, and I'm a techie guy, right? I do think that tester or developers are more likely to do unit testing than what we saw in earlier days, right? Pre-Agile, I think developers better understand that part of their job is not just to construct things, but to make sure, at least at the unit and component level, that things work before they, declare victory. I think Agile has helped in that regard. One thing that I think has hurt is that there's a perception that everything's automated in Agile. I'm an automation guy. I like automation, but let's face it, everything can't be automated. It can't be. There's just some things you cannot automate. You cannot automate usability testing, for instance. Sure, you can use tools to help it, but it's a subjective view, right? And I think that has hurt a bit because it's driven us to this point where everyone expects all testers to be automators. That's probably not true. All right, here we go. What do you all think? Here's the results.
Oh, nice.
So it looks like, wow, 60% of the people think Agile has helped at least a little or a lot. Agile has helped testing. What do you all think about that? Johanna, Rob?
I really like this. I think that this shows that the idea of understanding your product from several perspectives, not just what the requirements are and not just what you built, but how the entire product works all together. I think that's what I see a lot in my consulting. I'm a little worried about hurdle level. That I would like to know more about that.
Yeah, maybe we'll get some good questions on that.
Yeah.
So we got higher percentage than the last one believe that Agile has helped. 68%. Comments, thoughts? Rob, Johanna, what do you think?
It depends on how old people are, I guess.
Well, that is true. I was thinking that too. Some people are like, I don't know anything else, right? Well, I only know what we do, and maybe that's Agile. Right?
What did you do before Scrum and all that stuff? Yeah. So it depends what you're starting from. Right? This is a transformational thing. Has it helped or hurt your career in testing or other areas? Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it depends where you started.
That's a really good point, Rob. I think that a lot of the stuff that we did back in, at least in my career, in the 70s and up until about the mid to late 80s, for most people, were more agile than what happened in the mid to late 80s and on into the 90s. With all the maturity levels and starting to have a defined process, that was a real challenge for the software industry.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. Great. Thanks, audience, for participating in that. We're going to share a couple of slides, and then we're going to jump into Q&A. So some additional resources that we have available for you all. And we are, incidentally, we are sending out the deck to everybody. This is being recorded. You can go listen to it later. You can share it with your teams. Point it to people who missed it. It's all available for you all. But here are some resources that Rob and Johanna recommended of things they've written or things they participated in that they felt you might find of interest. So definitely check these things out. We are following this up with more conversation on the Hub. If you're not familiar with the TechWell Hub, it is a Slack workspace for software professionals. We have now over 7,000 members of the Hub. It is free. You can sign up by going to hub.techwell.com. If you're not a member, I'm going to jump over there after we finish here and go to the Agile testing channel. If anybody wants to continue to talk, anybody wants to ask questions we don't have time for, definitely feel free to do that, but also use it as a resource. People are getting on, asking questions about things in these different areas, talking about what's going on at events and conferences and training. Most definitely use it as a resource and help collectively each other. I do want to mention the next webinar that we're doing here at Coveros. I think you all find this very fascinating. If you haven't followed, you probably can't miss it if you're on the East Coast and you couldn't get gas a couple of weeks ago. The Colonial Pipeline issues, the SolarWinds hack that happened a while back. I believe personally, everybody in software needs to understand these attacks. It's just because you're not a security person doesn't mean you're not part of the security process. Just like if you're not a tester, it doesn't mean you're not part of testing and quality. Security is becoming that important. So please check it out. I'm going to have a special guest, Jeff Williams. He's an expert in security, expert in supply chains and supply chains attacks. We're going to talk about all this in terms of software, right? What does this have to do with software? What does it have to do with DevOps? What does it have to do with the security of our applications and our software? So definitely check that out. It's coming in July. We'll post a date when it is. So we do have some upcoming stuff, and we do always give a promo for people that attend the webinars to thank you. There's a promotional code on here for anybody that's attended the webinar for some upcoming classes in Agile testing and test automation, for the upcoming Agile DevOps virtual conference we're holding, the leadership summit that goes on after that, and a new class that we've recently launched, which is our Agile and DevOps leadership certification class. If you're interested in improving your leadership capabilities, there's a class in June. I'm teaching it. I would love to have you in that class as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we can talk some more with the time we have left. Looks like we have, man, I planned that perfectly. Right? 10 minutes I said for questions. It's, well, now 9 since I was bragging. It's dropped to 9, but we have time for questions. So why don't I'll turn it over to you, Alexa.
Okay. Our first question was from Mary Ann. When dealing with an organization with multiple Scrum teams, how does the Agile framework support end-to-end systems validations? I've seen documented examples in industry, as well as in my own organization where deliverables work in isolation, but integrations break down.
Wow, I've seen people do great work in that area. The excellent companies that don't brag about it too much, but there's all sorts of innovations and approaches. If you look at specifically what in the Agile universe helps with this, there's a concept that I don't know the official name of it, but they call them integration stories, which are beautiful things that are, it's not all, stories aren't always adding features and stuff. And I've seen this work very well. You can't deny that I've seen it work very well. You might not like it, Johanna, but I've seen it work.
All right, we're finally, gloves coming off. Let's go, Johanna. Yeah. What's up?
So, yeah, I agree you've seen it work well. I advocate against integration stories, and instead I advocate that people integrate into one main branch that nobody integrates off of in any other branches.
I'm talking about cross-system integration, not code integration. So, but go ahead.
Right. But the way you make that happen is you first integrate everything on the main, and you always have stories. Then, and if multiple teams have to work on one story at a time, that's what they do. So if you talk about an application on a cell phone where you have to have this is all about program management and how you organize a program. If you have to have the thing that works with the user interface that is designed for you. And you have to work with the operating system, and you have all these other branches for all of your various features. Then teams commit as teams to work together on how do you make a feature work through the architecture. I have seen this work also. So I am not a fan of integration stories. I am a fan of how do you make the feature work literally through the entire architecture. So I have had very good results with that.
That's integration top to bottom in a feature. Are you talking, Rob, maybe about integration across features? Like truly
I'm talking about business process. Like, for example, the cases I'm thinking of are educational systems where you have asset management, building management, registration systems that are diverse technologies that come from not just different teams, but different organizations that are basically brought together with a technology like, for example, MuleSoft, if you're familiar with that type of technology, that's merging these things together. And the actual stories that I'm talking about are actually pretty complex integration stories that make sense in the context I've seen it. But I claim ignorance, and keep in mind that the customers that I have mostly are people that are having a lot of difficulties. And so I see some things that maybe are hybrids that are far from ideal.
Yeah, that's good.
So,
let's take the rest of that to Slack, to the hub. Let's get some more questions answered while we're here. You want to get the next question, Alexa?
Okay, we had a question regarding the team structure. Do you have recommendations for Agile teams that are not co-located?
I think somebody here might have some ideas from a book that she wrote.
Yeah. So Mark Kilby and I wrote From Chaos to Successful Distributed Agile Teams. And there are three main structures, right? We've been working as nebulas where we're all dispersed right now. And as people start to come back into the office, they might be clusters and they might be satellites. What really matters is the hours of overlap. Does your team, all the people on your team, do you have at least 3 to 4 hours during the day where you can collaborate? How much should we talk about collaboration here? Right, Rob, you actually call collaboration a hard skill, which I believe is correct. Jeff, you talked about collaboration. I talked about collaboration. If you don't have time to collaborate, I don't see how you actually have an Agile team.
Anything to add to that, Rob?
Well, I think a lot of people sort of don't realize the simplicity of something like Scrum, which was sort of cooked up by small co-located groups of people who are always in each other's face almost all the time. I have seen teams work well getting software done in all sorts of different lifecycle models and frameworks, and I would say that almost every successful distributed team, which by the way does not have overlapping time zones, I would say you couldn't classify what they're doing as following Agile methods. I think you can do good software development that way, and you got to like the punishment fit the crime and figure out a way to do it. If you have to get it done. You might want to do service-oriented software engineering models, for example, which are not following Agile methods, but allow for disparate groups to operate as a shared service provider. This type of model might fit better as some of these distributed teams.
Yeah, go ahead, Johanna.
Go ahead. Oh, one more thing. Mark and I did a whole bunch of research to find any example of successful follow the sun. We found 0 successful examples.
Yep. And if you read the State of the DevOps survey a couple of years ago, they asked this question and they analyzed the results. And what they showed was, and I'm doing this off memory, so I believe it was low performers in the DevOps kind of maturity group or model were 3 times as likely to be outsourcing some of their development, test, and delivery process. And low performers who outsourced single functions, like all their testing, all their dev, were 7 times as likely to be low performers on DevOps metrics. You cannot have a high performing software organization unless you figure out how to collaborate and have everybody work together and feel like they're on the same team. And all the stats say that. So, organizations either have to move in that direction or they will continue to suffer, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, but there's different reasons for it. It's not always the goal isn't always to be the most efficient thing. Sometimes when I've worked on military contracts, for example, there's political reasons and security reasons that lead to these things, not just efficiency.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's different types of development too, and maintenance and support. I mean, there's all sorts of different types of projects.
I just don't want to just focus just on one dimension here.
That's very fair.
There you go.
Alexa, you got another question?
Yeah, so we have a question. So what do you see as some of the disadvantages of the Agile model?
I was like, if I may, agility challenges all the preconceived ideas the managers have about how to lead and manage in the organization. If you want collaborative, self-managing teams, you have to trust people. You have to empathize with their work. You have to not impose micromanagement or all that stuff on them. I mean, and you have to change the reward system. Instead of rewarding people for individual achievement, you have to reward them for how do we coach each other? How do we offer feedback to each other? How do we all learn together? And I do not see enough of that in organizations right now.
Rob, thoughts on that?
Well, my only thought on it just jumps out something I mentioned earlier, that it's very important to consider things like value synchronization. And I wouldn't worry too much about the specifics of any one, what might call a framework, is Kanban, Scrum, all these different variants and hybrids of these things. Think about the Agile manifesto, for example. There's some values. Do you have in your team a set of values that you share? Do you understand what the stakeholders value? Do you understand what the customer values, the users value, the team members value? I think that's the type of understanding that's really, really important. And I think Agile really, really promotes thinking of things from the point of view of values, at least if you go back to the origin story here of it.
That's awesome. I know we are out of time. I want to thank you, Johanna and Rob, for participating. This has been lots of fun. We could probably do 10 of these, right? I mean, let's face it, we could. There's a lot of ground to cover here, but I appreciate you all covering so much ground in a short amount of time. That was really fun.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everybody who was here.
Yeah, and anybody that's interested, head over to the hub. We can continue to Slack and talk about some of these things and answer additional questions. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you. Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
See y'all.